we've got an email address.
What's the email address, Ian?
Well, it was the subject of considerable, at least internal, external monologue style debate. And I came up with some really rubbish ones. But it was not until we got together and started talking about it that technology eeyores at whatalotofthings.com really came into focus.
So when did we coin the phrase of technology Eeyore?
We didn't.
Oh.
It was our listener.
Yes.
The way I said that makes it sound like there's only one.
Well, that's fine.
And there is more than one. Our listener Mary coined that and described us as technology Eeyores. And I felt at the time that that was a very understandable description of us based on our content up to that point.
We should get some stickers done, shouldn't we?
We should get some stickers done.
Because I believe that the image of Eeyore is in the public domain as well, isn't it?
I believe it is. So I think maybe I'll go onto my iPad in the same way that I did for the logo that we have on all our episodes and maybe do a technology Eeyores image.
We will wear the badge with pride.
In the floppy ears.
In the floppy ears. So yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
You've inspired our email address.
Okay. So can I make my announcement now?
All right. Although I feel like the email address maybe had a few more legs in it, but, that's fine.
I'm just quite excited about my announcement.
Go for it.
Because this is quite monumental. So I've had an iPhone 7 Plus. 7 Plus.
We're up to a 15 now.
Yeah. So, which is now 8 years old, nearly 8 years old.
Yeah.
It's still getting security updates, which is kind of testament to Apple's commitment, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So, they know that the world has changed and people perhaps aren't refreshing their phones quite as much as they used to. So they're keeping the old ones up to date rather than saying, well, it's time you get with the now, isn't it, and get yourself a new phone.
Yeah.
So,
have you at any time replaced the battery in it?
Yes.
See, that helps to keep it going.
Yes. But I decided that it was time to make a change.
What would be the natural change to make from this point?
Well, I thought, I could get like an iPhone 15 or a 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I thought, let's have a total change. So I've now got a Samsung Galaxy S22 Plus. Plus.
So you've retained a phone model with plus on the end of the name.
Yeah. So that's enough continuity for me.
Is it?
Yeah. So I found a refurbished one as well. So I've bought second hand.
Well
so
done.
I'm fully leaning into the reuse rather than
replace.
dig up the ocean floor. Insert it and then insert it into a battery and then put it in the latest iPhone. So I've rejected the orthodoxy and gone with refurbished.
Have you not watched Apple's videos about where Mother Earth comes and tells them off?
Tells them off?
Yeah, there was this whole thing where they did an ad where Mother Earth came to their annual checkup of their environmental credentials and was in a negative mood, presumably having been to a lot of other companies' equivalent things in order to tell them off.
Yeah.
And then she's grudgingly happy with Apple at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Feels like propaganda to me.
Well, to be fair to Apple, I think their dedication in that area is good, although they're labouring under some difficulties. But I mean, I've got an Apple Watch now, which is carbon neutral,
right?
To the point where they've even offset all the possible electricity that could be put in it.
Yeah.
But this is about you, not me. Ash.
Yeah. I keep winning Apple Watches.
Do you?
Yeah.
How many have you got? I can't see any on your wrists.
Well, I don't use an Apple Watch because they're not good for running. Really, I don't think they're not good for sport in general.
No, this one is.
So
this one is for all of my climbing up sheer cliff faces.
All right, okay.
Going for runs in deserts or the Arctic.
All right, okay. Or maybe I'm wrong then.
Saw
Maybe
all of those activities on the marketing video for it.
that's why I
I
decided.
immediately had to buy it.
So as soon as you put it on, you were like, right, okay, I'm in a desert, running shoes on, off we go.
Well, no. As soon as I put it on, I thought, well, that's the hard bit done. But yes, I recognise that the received wisdom on Apple Watches is they still don't last as long as Garmin's,
Yeah.
even when they're got Ultra in the name and they last 2 days instead of one.
As long as you put Ultra or Plus in the name, then that totally changes the product, doesn't it?
And then Ultra Plus
Ultra
pushes it right over the edge.
So the other thing, small thing,
Yes.
that caught my eye was it was in the Guardian's Techscape newsletter, and it was about ChatGPT's favourite words.
Oh.
What it's saying is that they don't appear that much in the internet at large, but ChatGPT uses them quite often. So words like delve, explore, tapestry, testament, and leverage.
Well, I think that's a testament to its significant vocabulary.
Yeah.
That gives it the leverage that enables it to compete so effectively in the large language models marketplace.
It does it kind of explain when you read the output of a large language model, it seems immediately obvious that it's been written by a large language model.
Yeah, but doesn't it make you want to delve more deeply and explore the topics that it raises?
Of course, it's all part of the rich tapestry of AI, isn't it?
Bingo!
There you go, got them all.
Yeah, we can. This is our new copyrighted game.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
So large
ChatGPT favourite word bingo.
So large language model output reminds me of how I used to write until I learnt to do it more simply.
Do you think it makes it not sound human?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think it's quite good at sounding human. What lets it down is this kind of slightly flowery language that it indulges in. I independently of you reading this in The Guardian, found a GitHub gist entitled ChatGPT Cliches. Although I'm always curious when people write ChatGPT as two separate words. I wonder if that's because they're making some kind of point that GPT stands for something and is a separate thing. But I'm pretty sure OpenAI run the two things together into one word. But testament features at the top of that in its cliches. A testament to.
A testament to.
Important to note, important to understand. It says fear not, apparently.
See.
And multifaceted. I feel like that's a nice word. We should say multifaceted more often.
Yeah, it's got treasure trove in there. I quite like that.
Yes, which can be transformative, which it also has in there.
It's almost similar to a business language bingo, isn't it?
This, though, is a much bigger bingo card than we were given by The Guardian.
Yeah, true.
We could be using this to shed light on... I can't do it. I'm going to have to get rid of it so I can't see it anymore.
Okay, let's stop that.
Yeah. and that was when all they could say in their podcast was ChatGPT cliches. I do think that is an interesting one. And it's funny that it surfaced for both of us independently. I wonder if it's a thing that people have just started really noticing.
Yeah. I'm not sure that they're cliches either, are they?
Strictly, possibly not.
Yeah. But I don't want to get too militant on what is a cliche and what isn't.
It might be a metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a simile.
Or onomatopoeia.
Yes. It might be that. Oh dear. And that was when they went over the edge into the abyss.
Into nonsense.
Into nonsense, yes. Oh dear. So yes, but I do think it's interesting to see that kind of stuff. And I wonder what if we did that with Claude or indeed with Gemini or Gemma. These are Gemma's the open source model from Google that I guess is small Gemini. all of which is just a stupid detour. So going back to the point, it's interesting. It will be interesting to compare LLMs to find out if they're using the same common words.
Yeah.
Although you'd expect Microsoft Copilot to use the same words as ChatGPT because they're the same model.
Yeah.
But Claude and Gemini from Google might be different, so it'd be interesting.
Maybe we need a straight-talking LLM that tells it how it is.
Oh, you mean like Grok?
Yeah. I always, whenever someone says I'm a straight-talking person who tells it how it is, I'm like, oh, God. You're going to have some horrendous views, aren't you?
Well, maybe you'd have to correct them to you. Maybe you're telling it as you see it, and you should get some glasses.
Are you ready for any things?
Well, it would be unusually soon to start talking about things.
I don't know.
Normally we make at least an hour and a half of recording before we get to any frivolous topics such as
things.
Yes.
So who went first last time? In the interest of fairness.
Oh my goodness. That is a very good question. Well, last time we covered... See, I'm doing this, trying to do it quickly to make it seem seamlessly
seamless.
We covered managing IT service providers and voice cloning. So which one did we do first?
I think we did IT service providers, didn't we?
I think we did. So that sounds like it must have been mine. So therefore, in the interest of fairness, which obviously is very important.
Is the chief interest.
And we've simplified the meaning of fairness to just mean which order we do the things in. So that makes it a lot easier to be fair when you only have to consider that one dimension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A simple version of fairness.
Yes.
To
much
keep
more comprehensible for the regular person.
Okay. So, my thing.
Yes. Ash, what is your thing?
So I get to talk about something really vague this time.
Oh, excellent.
I thought I'll pick something vague because Ian always picks vague things.
And so that must be okay.
So yeah, it must be successful. So once this is over after like 5 minutes.
Well, I think the woollier it is, the more you can make it last for 5 hours, which is a bit of an editing task.
Yeah. So my thing is career paths for testers or testing specialists.
Well, that's an interesting one. So say a bit more.
Yeah. So I was reading, I get the excellent Agile Testing Fellowship newsletter by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory.
Two luminaries of testing.
Indeed.
Whose contribution has been massive.
I'm sure they're on Mastodon somewhere.
They're probably...
I thought I'd gotten away with that without you asking about Mastodon.
But
then I brought it up. So I'm sure that you won't be able to resist some point in this podcast another attempt to try and guide me towards signing up.
I don't need to do that. The hand of inevitability is on.
Do you think?
Now. Yeah, I mean you're already referring to things on Mastodon, and soon you'll just realise that you need to be a first-class player in this new and exciting and actually rather nice and sweet space. Hachyderm.io.
Hachyderm.io.
It's a pun. It's like pachyderm, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say means elephant. But what they did was that they changed the P for an H. Oh, dear Lord. I've not cried with laughter in one of these for a while.
I don't know if we'll be able to recover from that, to be honest.
I'm just very happy to have been able to enlighten you and by proxy our amazing listening public as to why Hachyderm is a rather clever name.
Puns are best when they're explained in a step-by-step manner, aren't they?
They so are.
So my thing is about career paths for testing specialists. So why do I find this thing interesting? So obviously, as a tester, it's quite dear to me. So Ian's just wiping the tears from his eyes.
I promise I'll listen to you any second now.
Because I've gone from developer to tester to scrum master and then back to tester, and relatively stayed in that role ever since, but always been dragged into like the general machinations of an organisation afterwards. Even as a tester, kind of getting drawn into, like the wider debates. And partially it's me, because I can't help but get involved in such things.
But it's not just you, is it? Because I was reading on a social media.
Would you like to know?
I'll give you a clue. The logo is an elephant. Now you're going to have to help me here. A tester called Maret.
Yes. The surname I can't say, and I wouldn't want to begin with.
It's going to be difficult because it's nice to say people's names when you cite them. But she has been talking about how she always ends up having to fix the organisation in order to be able to be a tester.
Yeah.
And she made that point very, very well, actually, on this thing. I was just reading it this morning.
Yeah.
I mean, is that what you're talking about as well?
Yeah. Inevitably, when you try and do the role of tester well, you then come up against organisational constraints. Whether it be like the reputation of testing in the organisation, how the rest of the team perceives testing, if people see it as valuable, or they think that you're an inconvenience, or they want to outsource you, or just get rid of you completely. So with all this in mind, I often find myself at a bit of a crossroads, and more often than not, advised to get out of the testing game and, go and become a engineering manager or an architect or something like that. So I'm interested, what is the career path for a tester to stay, to remain in that role and excel and add value for the organisation?
So when I saw you were bringing this to today's episode as your thing, I tried to search for the most senior tester in an organisation, and it was very fruitless, actually.
Yeah.
So I found a post from somebody who has just got a job as a software engineer at Facebook, but his previous experience has been as an SDET.
Right.
A software developer. What's the E stand for?
Oh, is it software? I should know this. There's software developer in test, and then there's software development engineer in test.
Know the difference between SDET and tester. Software development engineer in test.
Right. Okay. So similar.
Yeah. So, but he was going for a software engineer, but that's not all that senior. And I was searching for distinguished engineers in large organisations who come from a test background, and they're bound to exist, at least to some point. But I couldn't find any, and that kind of bothered me.
Yeah, because I used to have this argument with previous companies. So you would be offered like a technical or a people route. So either, you go into security testing or performance testing or, that kind of way, or you become a manager. But what happens if you're a really great exploratory tester with like a flair for finding interesting bugs? There's nowhere to go. You might become like a senior tester, but even if you excel at that and have add loads and loads of value, there's very few places for you to go that aren't prescribed in technical or people routes.
Let's say you had a career stage called a distinguished software tester.
Yeah.
What would that look like? So it'd probably be called distinguished quality engineer, which would immediately annoy you.
Yeah.
But let's say it was distinguished software tester. What would that person have to be able to write in their case to be admitted to that professional level?
Yeah.
What sort of accomplishments would somebody need to have done that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because a lot of distinguished and sort of staff engineers will often pick up either a project, or if a business was having, say, security issues, a very senior engineer, developer might pick that up and run with it and then, help the business out. And that would be their staff or distinguished project, if you like.
Yes.
So I think that's like a common path, because it's like, you've picked up something of value and you've run with it and you've, changed the business basically into a better place. So probably something from a testing point of view would be similar as well. So, we're having, I don't know, performance and load problems. So you would expect, I would expect, I guess, probably a principal or distinguished tester to say, right, okay, well, let's start to, get an approach together for performance and load testing, and then begin to implement it and make some changes based on those test results. So that kind of activity. And then maybe something a bit more like cross-cutting as well, because I have been in the principal role before, and trying to spend time with each of the teams. So one of the things that I did was offer a menu of different services to the teams to say, right, this is where we can help you out. Better test automation, or training in exploratory testing, or whatever it is. Try and raise the general level of testing everywhere. But for that role, it requires a certain set of skills, and then obviously the ability to communicate well. So it might not be for everybody, but you can have a great tester who hasn't maybe got those skills, but will be stuck, where they are. And what's the progression for that tester?
Well, how do they get into situations where they can begin to learn those skills?
Yeah.
And a lot of it also is mentoring.
Yeah.
And I think you would expect someone who is achieving that kind of level in testing to have done a lot of mentoring, but also part of that mentoring is helping people to grow their careers in these kind of directions. And that mentoring has often got sponsorship in it. So it's kind of, okay, well, I'm going to recommend you to this project.
Yeah.
We're looking for somebody to do this. And we know you haven't got that experience, but I'll vouch for your general ability and that you want to grow your career, by doing that.
Yeah.
And so you end up with that kind of sponsorship can be very helpful as well. But managing your career, I mean, it took me years at IBM before I even began to really understand about that. And I had some really good mentors who just completely transformed my understanding of how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think in the past, I've done less of that because the way forward was clearer. But then I think it's probably once you get to a certain level, you then need to, have a bit more of a plan to manage what you're going to do with yourself. So, but that's where the going in different directions comes in. So I know loads of testers who've become, say, Scrum Masters. I went down that path for a while myself as well. So, and then they've kind of stayed in that area and become agile coaches or whatever. I have a bit of a mixed relationship because I quite like when testers do migrate to other roles.
Yeah.
Because if a tester becomes a developer, some testers get a bit upset and they're like, oh, well,
Splitter.
Yeah, well, well, you did that because you have to get paid more. And it's like, I want to have a bit more of a kind of view of it, because it's like, well, if a tester takes what they've learnt from being a tester into a developer role, I think that's probably a net positive for the team. So I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So
I think you're right. And I suppose in the end, this has to work for teams, but it has to work for individuals as well. Great specialisation in something is sometimes very, very valuable.
Yeah.
But there are normally, when you become very specialised in something, you've got to pick your thing.
Yeah.
Because as you narrow your experience and your skills, you're implicitly saying, I don't do these other things. I do this thing. Yeah. And if you pick the wrong thing, and it suddenly goes out of fashion or something, then that can be a mistake. But I feel as though the diversity of experience is a good thing.
Yeah, because some testers, in terms of path, have picked, like A.D. Stokes. He's now like a accessibility specialist.
Yeah.
So has picked that as an explicit specialism because he believes in it, and he wants and knows that things can and should be better. So he's picked it as a speciality. So I guess that's kind of another path, isn't it? So it's like, well, which is slightly more tangential to the normal organizational path. Because say if your organization offers you, like, continue to be a tester or go become a people manager, but then if you say, right, well, I'm going to, deeply learn and bring accessibility testing principles and practices into my work, then you've taken like your own path then, haven't you? So I guess you've got two things. You've got what's available to you via your organization, and then what's available to you sort of extra organization wide. So, and then you can pick, which way to go from there. So that's kind of interesting as well. But, and also I think we shouldn't assume that obviously people will stay with one organization and adhere to their career path, because every organization has slightly different ones. So you're probably going to move around a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to like affect your path. So, but I don't know. I mean, our test is just like any other role in that regard. It's like for a developer, can you just go, oh, right, there's like an architect path and a, team lead path and then a.
But I think these things converge as you become more senior.
Yeah.
And your deep specializations often become less sort of what you're doing overall, because as you become more senior, as you rise through your career, then leadership and dealing with people becomes a more important kind of thing on the whole. And, if you can't communicate with people about your subject matter area, then it really holds you back.
Yeah.
You can't rise up in that way. And so part of me is sort of thinking, I wonder if the idea of a distinguished engineer is a sort of executive technical position.
Yeah.
Maybe these things kind of converge, and actually you become a distinguished engineer from a test background or from a development background, but actually it kind of blurs together, because what will happen is that when you get into those kind of roles, you're a troubleshooter or you're leading very large things that contain your specialization but everything else as well.
Yeah.
I don't think you can retain a deep specialization. Maybe you can, but probably in various areas of if it's a very big business, then having a distinguished engineer who really knows about one very narrow thing or product or something might be a good idea. But it seems to me that as you rise through the kind of ranks of a technical role, then first of all, you need a business that lets you do that.
Yeah.
So it has the concept of a distinguished engineer or, very senior technical role. But if it does, I feel like testers should be able to rise into that as much as any of the other disciplines.
Yeah, but maybe that doesn't, in my experience, that doesn't really happen. So if I look at organisations, I think back to organisations I've worked for, and they've had team leads, technical leads, or whatever, none of them have been testers. It's always been developers. And there's some slight sort of oddity there, isn't there? That you don't see technical team leads, architects very rarely come from a tester background, especially with the architect one. I'm like, well, it's a kind of like a whole system, a systems thinking sort of role, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where a tester's skills of thinking about risk and impact, and what could go wrong, and what situations we need to handle, would be quite well suited to that role, but it seems to happen quite rarely.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a cultural angle to that. People don't expect testers perhaps to do that.
Yeah, and testers don't expect to want to do that either, or don't put themselves forward. Leave that to someone else because it's like kind of the accepted role.
So, what do we say to testers? What would you say to testers about how to transcend those perceived or actual limitations, career limitations?
I think you told me this story about, I think it was people at Eton were given a situation and said, you're Prime Minister and you need to decide, you know.
This was their admissions paper that they used to have on their website for sample admissions paper.
So it's like, you know,
12-year-olds.
So you go to a comprehensive school, as it were, and you would never get asked that question. Yeah. So I see it kind of similarly with testers, because testers have been relatively late admission to development teams. Previously, there would be a testing team, and then people talk about like embedded testers. It's like I really don't like that phrase because it's part of the team. It's part of the team's work.
We've just fired them into a team at very high velocity.
But it makes it it sounds like they're some kind of, you know, external entity.
Yeah.
You know, that's been like plugged into this previously like unsullied body.
Unsullied by.
So it's a very, very strange sort of turn of phrase to me.
But what it means is teams need to have testers. They need to have those skills. Yeah. Because in the end, who understands what a good testing configuration, if you like, is for a particular project? Yeah.
Because it all started off quite basic. So I remember my first sort of jobs transitioning from being on a testing team where all the testers sat together and waited for the thing to come over the wall to being actually on the development team. I just don't know if we've got like to a comfortable spot with what we want from testers. I think because like companies that like often purge all their testers as well. So I remember I think it was Skyscanner that did it. They just sort of one day were like, right, the testers are gone. And it's time, the developers have to pick up the testing work and off we go. And that was it. And they since returned because it turns out that a lot of the developers didn't like it.
Well, there's that whole thing, isn't there, about how developers just think, oh, testing is someone else's job, so I don't have to do anything. Yeah.
But there's this sort of continuous like struggle with testing and testers getting outsourced, purged. And it's always like some sort of quasi-religious sort of argument about like whether or not, you know, you should have testers doing the testing or developers doing the testing, or, you know, God forbid you just try and have like a blend of skills and everyone contributes to the activity.
Of the team.
Yeah, of the team. But then some teams get on fine without testers as well, don't they? And that's a good thing to me. I'm like, well, probably.
Well, they probably don't get on that well without testing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in terms of like career paths, there's testing, it still gets sort of like I say, insourced, outsourced, purged, re-added. Some teams have testers, some teams don't. It's all like there's like inconsistency, and I think that contributes to like testers continuously having to like justify their role within a development team, which is quite exhausting and doesn't help you like get on with your career either.
No.
So I think there's lots of subtle blockers in terms of how organisations sort themselves out. There's general perception of testing in the industry, and then you've got others who just seem to say, oh, well, I'm going to pick up accessibility testing or performance or security and I'm going to go and do that. And then they generally get, you know, some career satisfaction out of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, some think testers are doomed with AI. But I guess it's...
Well, they've been doomed before that are still here.
Yeah, yeah. So that was my thing. I find myself like always in the middle of this thing because I really enjoy testing and I enjoy being a specialist in it. But also I feel the forces trying to either tell me to get out of the testing game or to continue to kind of plough a path in there while inevitably getting involved in the scrapes of organisational therapy is the phrase.
Well, I found the quote that I was talking about, and while the person that published the quote was, as I said, the person whose quote it was someone different. And that's the quote.
As testers, we're often expected to not only do our work, but to fix the organisation to be able to do our work. And that was Anna Bayek who said that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, very well put.
Very well put.
Yeah.
Superb.
But imagine if you had to fix the organisation in order to have a career path. That's tough.
Yes, it's something that's more normally put in the job descriptions of senior managers.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's tough.
So that was a great thing. And I think there's a hell of a lot we could still
There's more
say
questions.
about it.
More questions than answers, probably.
Well, I think, but there is something there where you could start to say what the basics might look like.
Yeah.
And it's going to be things like good mentoring, things like those wicked problem kind of projects around how things are tested, how you lead something like that. I feel like there's some stuff there, but I think maybe the biggest thing from just thinking, about it is really how do you give testers the feeling that they can do all this stuff, and that they deserve it. Is that being unfair?
No, that makes sense. I think, again, from previous experience, the majority of testers that I have worked with would not put themselves forward for, opportunities like that.
So we're saying testers, rise up.
Yeah.
Forward the rebellion.
Yeah, absolutely. Always.
Always.
That's the answer, right?
Yeah. Superb. Well, thank you for that one.
Thanks, Ian.
So we had the agile interlude and the pigeon interlude.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we did last time. So maybe this one could be we can't have a joke interlude. That sounds like a kind of thing that appears to be an interlude, but when you look into it properly, it turns out it isn't really.
Fake interlude.
A fake interlude.
Yeah.
We could have a fake interlude, which is more stressful than the things surrounding it.
Yeah. I'm about to have an interlude. A job interlude.
A job interlude.
So then we could talk about that interlude.
Do we call that a holiday?
Well, part of it will be holiday. But I might put it on my... I was reading the other day, someone had posted on LinkedIn that... so they'd posted about people taking career breaks on there, and what to do, what to put it on what to put it as on your CV. So
as to give the impression of a valuable interlude.
Yeah, a valuable interlude.
This is a valuable interlude.
Yeah.
So agile interlude, pigeon interlude, valuable interlude.
But rest is valuable as well, right?
Am I setting us on the course now that every time we record an episode, we have to think of a new kind of interlude that we're going to have?
So my CV will have an interlude in it. I'm proud to say, but it's got a few interludes in it. To be fair, but I'm happy to have an interlude.
Good.
I don't think we should fear the interlude. If one can do it, then don't fear the interlude.
Yes.
And I've often come back refreshed and ready for the next thing.
Following an
interlude. When I've not had an interlude, I've been less refreshed and less ready for the next thing.
Yes. But none of them presumably were pigeon interludes.
No.
Or agile interludes.
Well, maybe agile interludes.
Yeah. I suppose that's very possible, isn't it?
Are you ready to begin your thing?
I'm just trying to remember what it is.
Well, you only wrote it about an hour and a half ago.
Yes, that's true. Okay. So my thing. So I bagsied this at the end of the last one.
Oh, yeah.
And you were obviously going to compete with me, but instantly forgot that that's what you were going to do.
Yeah.
Hence your woolly thing.
Slightly vague. Stop picking on testers thing.
Yes. Don't be mean to testers, kids. So my thing is the XZ, he said resolutely,
Z.
refusing to say Z. I've just said it now. The XZ security issue. So this was just astonishing to me. I mean, but also completely unsurprising.
Yeah.
I guess those two sides of it for me were partly that it took such a lot of planning by all these bad actors. You know, it took them a couple of years to do it. But I'm also very conscious because I do a reasonable amount of development as part of just various projects I'm involved with. And I would never particularly say I'm a software developer.
No.
But I do end up doing a reasonable amount of writing code. And I'm always including libraries. So in Python, I do a lot of things with pandas and LangChain and NumPy and all these kind of libraries. And in JavaScript, I make free use of NPM libraries to do things. And I've always been aware that there's a certain danger to that or I've been aware of trusting when and so I kind of when I look at NPM things that I'm considering using, I look at them to see, is it a lot of developers?
Yeah, is a lot of developers? Is it up to date? Is it, do they keep their packages up to date?
Exactly. But that's not the same as any kind of code review.
No, it's more of a general feel, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose that what's happened here is that somebody's made approached the whole thing of compromising a piece of software in such a slow and careful way that kind of gut feel test is not valid.
No, it's not.
And there's a couple of really great articles where people have sort of documented what happened during the course of this compromise. And it's really an amazing coincidence that it was even noticed at all. But going back to how it was done, effectively people made new accounts on GitHub in 2020 or something like that. And they made various minor contributions to open source projects. But then they focused on this XZ compression package that was widely used. Yeah. So a lot of things you've heard of kind of use it in the background, including SSH, which is how everybody logs onto everything. Yeah. And they made this patch which introduced this security vulnerability. And then all these accounts started logging on to the GitHub repository and leaving all these comments, pressurizing the moderator of the open source project, and actually the main contributor by far, pressurizing him to accept these changes. Yeah. You need to appoint more moderators. This isn't moving fast enough. We need this to be maintained, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. That pressure that they applied to him meant that he agreed to this change being incorporated without, I guess, the level of review that he would probably have liked to have done. And it was kind of bullying, really. Yeah. And it's shocking how somebody's giving their time for free on top of a day job to maintain something. And yet it's quite commonplace for people to feel like they can give them a load of abuse for not doing things fast enough.
It fits with the open source discourse, doesn't it? When you go to any widely subscribed package which has an issue of some description, you will see comments saying, this essentially means that I've stopped development, or this is giving us a live issue. When will it be fixed? Yeah. And it's like, well, like you say, the maintainer's like, well, I've got a day job and I might do it at some point this week on an evening or something. Yeah. But
I guess it's something more fundamental, even longer than that.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's like the clashing of worlds, isn't it? So you've got free software at the point of use that's maintained by volunteers being included in systems which, generate billions of dollars of revenue. So there's the kind of pressure to take it on and to make sure that issues are fixed. But that's not like the volunteer way, is it?
And you see that, and you can see why so many open source projects are sponsored by large organisations. Like React, for example, comes from Meta.
Yeah.
And they field a lot of the developers that work on it. IBM does a lot of that as well. Google do it.
Yeah.
And without that, you see that there are vulnerabilities with these individuals whose packages are very wide. I know there's one you like to cite.
Oh, LeftPad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where people are downloading a package from the internet into their source code base in order to...
Yeah, it's like the classic trope, isn't it? To do something like really simple, like adding zeros to the left side of a number. But again, it's like writing the code to do that yourself in the, in a way that hasn't been like consumed by hundreds of other projects, and all the bugs have been like squashed out of it over time by use. There's some real value there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which is one of the powerful things about open source software, because instead of, I often think of this from like a testing point of view. So if your company writes a piece of software and you try and test it, then by the nature of testing, you've only got like you can only do a limited amount of testing. Yes. Whereas open source, well-subscribed open source projects are extremely well tested because they're tested by the world.
Yeah.
And by real usage and fixing over time, which you can't replicate that from a testing point of view.
So you have to trust.
Yeah.
And you focus on testing the bits that are internal, that were produced as part of the software package, rather than libraries that you...
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you have to trust. Because it became, you look at like the sort of, I don't know what the average number of packages is in a software project now, but I know that my Mac is full of node modules folders, which, gradually sucking the life out of my Mac. So you can't go and test all those things. You have to trust and rely upon the testing that's been done as part of that package. And like you say, that look and feel that you have, when you say, well, okay, it's got a 99% rating on NPM or pub.dev or whatever it is, and it's got some tests, and there's not been issues open for months and months and months with no one fixing it, and they've got a few maintainers. It's like, well, okay, that's probably good enough.
You've already demonstrated how much deeper you look into it than I do. But
I suppose it depends what you're trying to do as well, doesn't it?
There's this wonderful XKCD cartoon. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Right, okay.
It's got this very, very elaborate building kind of block construction thing on it, labelled all modern digital infrastructure. And then there's some stuff at the bottom which is all balanced on this one thing, which is labelled as a project some random person in Nebraska has been thanklessly maintaining since 2003.
Yeah.
And that cartoon was everywhere when this vulnerability was discovered. All over the social media that you probably didn't observe it.
Well, yeah. But I think the word there is thanklessly as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because if you compare it to, say, if you volunteered as a home help or at the local leisure centre to bring cups of tea out to people, then I suppose you might still get some grief if you did that badly. But you're still a volunteer. You can still withdraw your labour at any time.
Yeah, and people would thank you and recognise that you were doing that.
Yeah.
But on the internet,
no one says thank you. They just say, when will you make the change? And it's like, well, the maintainer probably has a day job and maybe some kids, and, can't just drop everything and do that for you. But like you said about in this example, with the subtle pressure to say, we need this merging because we're trying to do this. And, can we make sure this is in the next release, please? Because it's causing me a problem. All those things.
Yeah.
And there are maintainers are obviously humans, and they'll just, every now and then, they will maybe merge something that they're not quite ready to merge.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely does happen.
So the other side to this was how unlikely the process was of it being discovered.
Yeah.
And actually, it was a Microsoft engineer called Andres Freund who was mentioned, but he was trying to test Postgres, which he works on, which is a database package. And he noticed that some other packages, the SSHD processes, were using a lot of CPU. And then he linked that in his mind to some odd test failures from Postgres from like 3 weeks before. And it led him into this investigation where he actually discovered all this. But the chances of that happening were sufficient that you kind of think, how many other instances of it are there?
Yeah, especially like you say, the ones where it's been such a long game in order to get to this point.
Yeah.
As a tester, I loved that the malicious code was part of the tests. So they were all basically binaries that were going to be used to support the testing. So, which I found really interesting, because it's often the case that test code will not be scrutinized as closely as application code, which I found, like, I think that's really, it's a really interesting point in there that, you know, because I remember like hooking up a security scanner, and I did this. I just said, right, well, it was a Java project, so it just went to the application source code folder and just ignored the test folder to do the scan.
Yeah.
And it's like, so there's like there's something implicit in there, which is you will treat the test code slightly differently to the application code.
But if it was the test code, how did it affect the SSHD execution?
So there was a test code and some make files, it said in the video that I watched. So when you ran the make files, it went and looked in this binary, which was checked in
and
with
then it probably patched the source code from the test.
Yeah. So I don't sort of fully understand because I watched a video where someone had reverse engineered it all.
We'll include a link.
Yeah. But the other thing that I enjoyed was that the back door was actually in an XZ file as well.
Yes.
Which, the hackers do love a bit of irony. I do. They might not be the nicest actors in the world, but they do have a little bit of style. So I really enjoyed that as well, but as part of the analysis of the issue. And I guess with the chap who was doing the performance testing, Andreas Freund, I quite like that when you do performance testing, you find all kinds of things, and it just shows that one type of testing doesn't preclude another.
No.
So you do some performance testing, and it shows you where a security issue might be. Whether or not you can understand that and do what he did and say, well, actually, there were some funny test failures a few weeks ago, and now this. I'm sure that they're kind of related. Whether or not you make that link or not is probably a bit more sort of open to debate. But by looking at things from different angles, with an individual SSH session, you would never see this.
No.
Whereas trying to do it at some kind of scale.
Well, he was trying to quiesce the machine, and he couldn't understand why it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's that curiosity as well.
Yeah.
That is another great tester quality that's kind of driving him to find out why is this happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So rather than just dismissing just having a that's weird moment and saying just moving on, which you could do in this situation, he's gone a little bit further, which is really interesting, isn't it? But I just like that by doing one form of testing, it shows you something about the application which is not necessarily related to that form of testing. It's not exactly what you're looking for with that test.
Yeah. But
the information is there to be looked at.
Given that the thing he was testing was something completely else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I always remember back in the day that the scary testing was the non-functional testing. And the scariest of all the testing was failover testing.
Yeah. That's why you never did it, right? You just had nice thought exercises.
Yes.
So this is probably what will happen if we fail over.
See, security testing you'd always do, and that wasn't too terrifying.
Yeah.
But performance testing was the one above that, and then failover testing was just the testing too far.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that open source software might, I don't know if it will suffer from a loss of faith, but we talked a bit about, like, you trust the packages, or you have to trust the packages that you install.
Well, I feel like the open source and software world will have to become resilient against this kind of attack. And I'm sure people are thinking about how that might be able to happen, but I'm wondering about whether AI will.
Yeah.
Because actually, one thing I've seen with LangChain, as I've been using it, is that their GitHub issues are managed by an AI.
Right.
When you put in an issue, it gives you a view of what might be the problem and what other things you might try and stuff like that. I wonder if pull requests could start being automatically code reviewed by AI. Because an AI code review might well have picked up or given the human enough of a clue that there's something going on here that they might have then felt as though I'm going to look into it myself.
Yeah. Well, considering that the malicious code was in a binary, then it would be very hard for a human to see that, wouldn't it? Yeah,
and in the end, it's a pull request is really a list of changes, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it reminded me of when we were talking about voice cloning, and we kind of went down a path where we compared it to like open source,
yes,
and the issue of trust. So, because I think I remember you saying my general intent is to say let everybody have it and then see what
happens.
Yeah, but this is kind of what happens with, because you can go onto GitHub with any old email, set up an account, and begin to contribute to open source projects, and that's part of the beauty of it. So I can go onto any repo that I like, raise an issue, or pick up, a good first issue, fix it, put some documentation in, and then submit a pull request. And then, I don't know, you might get some questions from the maintainers. But in general, that's how you start, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anybody can do that. So people with good intent can do that, and people with bad intent. But again, it's like in the same spirit as, well, you've got to give it to them rather than holding it back. Because in theory, you could say, okay, so what's going to happen is that GitHub is going to go through an extensive vetting process for everyone who registers an account.
Yeah.
But then what happens? Because then GitHub is suddenly in control of what happens with open source software to a greater degree than it is now.
Well, it's interesting because LinkedIn do that, don't they? You can now be verified on LinkedIn using government ID to show that you're really you. I wonder what that gives LinkedIn and what it would give GitHub.
Yeah.
I mean, privacy is a never-ending
absolutely.
trade-off.
Yeah. But in theory, you have open source software being used in like society-defining products, banks, hospitals.
Well, it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our phones are full of it.
Yeah. So, and essentially anyone can come in and contribute to it, which is a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Especially your new phone.
Well, yeah. But that's a beautiful thing, right?
It is. And the open source has enabled, it's enabled the technology that we've got now. We would be so much further back if it did not exist.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine a world with no Linux in it. I mean, there'd be no Android. There'd be no...
Yeah.
There'd be no... everything. We'd all be running web servers on Windows NT or something.
Sounds like fun.
No, it doesn't. Sorry, I don't want to be too rude to Windows.
No, that's okay. I understand.
Assuming you're going to tell me next that you're going to abandon your Mac and
no,
and run Windows.
No more of that.
No more of that. Cool. So I think, like all the things we talk about, there's much more to say about this, but I feel like we've been going for a long time. So.
Well, yeah, indeed. But again, it's there's obviously a deeply technical part to it, and then there's like the wider societal issue with how it happened, and an interesting approach from the hacker to play such a long game to know that this might take years in order to come to fruition, which is really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's forward planning in a serious way.
Almost you wonder if any governments were involved in it.
Yeah.
And then you get into which ones might it be.
Yeah.
And it's not possible to rule out large swathes of the world doing something like that.
And lots of these backdoors probably exist and have been merged into open source software, which is deployed regularly on. So this was generally consumed into operating systems, wasn't it? Into Debian, I think it was, and others. So
it didn't get very far, fortunately, because the chap spotted it. But you do it does kind of beg the question of what else has happened.
Yeah. Well, we won't know until it happens.
No,
I guess is the thing.
Okay, I think I will abandon thing there.
Abandon thing.
Say that's my thing.
Excellent thing. Loads to think about.
Yeah. Or more likely to just worry about without really being able to do anything.
Yeah. And then just continue to do what we already do, but just with slightly more fear.
Would you like me to explain about Hacky-Derm again to you?
Yes, please. I don't think I understood the first time around.
I'm not sure the world is ready for that that level of amusement twice in one episode.
No, probably not.
It would just be an episode of us just giggling.
Okay. So that was 2 things.
It was 2 things. And they were quite deep, both of them, really.
Yeah.
So email us on our email address, which is
technologyeos@whatalotofthings.com.
It so is. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
No, I can't think how to stop